I mentioned earlier in one of my other homilies that Zephaniah is pretty much a negative prophet. He's not a very positive, doesn't usually have a very positive message. This is as positive as he gets, and it's the very end of his book, of his writing. And at the very end, he maintains the tradition. The tradition that at this point is probably 1,000 years old or more, that a Savior will come, that Israel will be redeemed, that the people will be embraced by God. Once again, no matter what their hardship, they will be embraced by God again, they will be redeemed, and they will be saved. It is a message that permeates the Old Testament scriptures. Pre-exilic, post-exilic prophets have the same message. It is consistent that salvation is coming through God, and that it will come in the form of a Messiah. It is a consistent message. One of the other things that is consistent about that is that when he comes, we will rejoice and have reason to rejoice. And so as we get closer to our own celebration, even as we look to the Old Testament, which does not really experience the Christmas story in any way, but it is a foreshadowing of that. And the expectation is that when it occurs, people will rejoice in the knowledge that the Messiah has come and delivered them. And that's what we do every single year when we come to Christmas. We rejoice that the Messiah has come to bring us salvation. You know, there are all kinds of debates about the Christmas story. There are all kinds of discussions about what did happen, what didn't happen, when it happened. None of that makes any difference. None of it. Jesus could have been born on the 4th of July. It doesn't make any difference. There could have been kings there. There could have been shepherds there. There could have been anybody there. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference whether there were stars or cloudy skies, or it doesn't make any difference. The fundamental difference is that the Messiah has come to save us. That's the message. When we look at the gospel passage, again, we come to these two women who, by all accounts, by all the social structures that existed at that time, really should not be playing an important part in this whole thing. I mean, really, they are two women who live on the margins of society. We have this 15, 16-year-old girl, peasant girl, pregnant, outside of marriage. Believe me, she lives on the margin of society. And this older woman who was considered unable to bear a child. And there was a curse that went with that. It was a belief that that person was cursed. And so she lived on the edge, on the margin of society. Two very vulnerable women who had no voice in the society around them, and certainly not in the religion that they experienced. And yet these two women are central figures in this moment. And the real heart of this passage is at the very end. As a matter of fact, it's the very last word of this reading, which is fulfillment. Fulfillment. Each woman in this passage recognizes that there is some fulfillment taking place in this moment. They've read the signs. They've seen the angels. They've gotten the message. And they recognize that in all of that, there is a fulfillment that is taking place. A fulfillment of God's promise. A fulfillment of preparation that's taking place for the people through the birth of John the Baptist, so that people could experience the fulfillment of the coming of the Messiah. I don't know what your life is like around Christmas. My life tends to be very hectic. So, getting a church ready for Christmas, I don't do a lot of the direct stuff, but I have to direct a lot of the stuff. And a lot of times, directing it means that some things are difficult to get done because everybody else is involved in very hectic activity. So it's not easy to get people to decorate churches or volunteer to do things for the church and all the rest of it. Not to mention all the other stuff that has to be done in a church business at this time of year. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done. I imagine the same is true in your own lives. And not to mention my own personal life. I got nieces and nephews and friends and all. I got to get gifts for all of them, get them wrapped, get them to them, particularly at this time of year when we can't visit. Think about, what we can and can't do in the midst of a pandemic. I have my own house stuff I have to do in terms of decorations and meal planning and all the rest of it. All the stuff that you all have as well. I'm already behind on my baking. We have all that stuff going on. And the temptation in the midst of that is to miss the fulfilling moments. This is a time of fulfillment for us, a time of experiencing the fullness of God's grace. Where do we experience that fulfillment? Mary experiences it in the announcement from Gabriel that she's bearing a son and that the son is a big deal. Elizabeth, the same way. She experiences this fulfillment not only in bearing her son, but in recognizing the role that Mary and her son are playing in this. These are all moments of fulfillment, and we all have them. We all are fulfilled by the people that we love and care for. We are fulfilled by the purposes we have in our own lives. We are fulfilled by the small encounters that shore us up or shore others up. We experience fulfillment in those moments, and that is exactly what we're supposed to experience in this moment. The fullness of God's grace. The fullness of God's grace, who fulfills his promises of salvation.